Hi, if you're watching this video, it means that we piqued your interest just a little bit with what it means to be healthy. And in this video series, we'll break down 3 components that we believe are essential aspects of being healthy. The first, and the one that is probably the nearest and dearest to our heart, is movement. Now, when we talk movement, there are some assumptions that we want to make sure that we're on the same page with. One is that our body is designed to move. We could come up with some great argument about Paleolithic man and our ancestors, but even without that, I think you and I would both agree that we feel better when we're active. So if our body was designed to move, we could come up with ways with which we could exercise or ways with which the body does move. And here are just one way of classifying that. 1, your body is designed to use its lungs. This is what we traditionally call cardiorespiratory type exercise. It's what Dr. Kenneth Cooper coined as aerobics. There's a vast category of activities and durations of effort that really primarily rely on your lungs. What that means is that there's a gas exchange happening, and those that are healthy can do that very well. Secondly, using your muscles. If on one end we think of aerobics and long duration activities, the other end we could think of lifting weights, using your muscle. There's great benefit to being strong, and there's lots of ways to categorize that. Another way that you might say that is with motor control. Now, if we break those 2 terms down, it means that your muscles are comprised of motor units, and the ability to control those muscles means that your body is stable. It means that you can hold certain positions. More importantly, it means that you can decelerate when you want to. Why would that be necessary? Well, something as simple as sitting down in a chair requires you not just to do a trust fall and gravity drop, but it means that you're pulling yourself down into a position under control. That's a prerequisite for healthy living and healthy movement for sure. Now the last is more or less this blend between the 2, and we call it moving blood. When we exercise, there's different engines that our body uses, and we've described 2 already. One that is primarily just oxygen and gas exchange, one that's muscles, and this third is where we use both of those, where muscles are being involved. I'm moving my joints through their full range of motion, but as well I'm breathing. I'm breathing in order to generate and produce ATP. That's a fancy way of saying that we can exercise in a way where we use all 3. And if we're smart about it, because we have other things to do, we would make sure that that's a component simply because it's efficient and also it's effective. So those are some ways with which we can train. Now, what type of movements are important? Well, primarily, we want to make sure that we can stabilize our spine. That just means that the muscles surrounding our spinal column should be able to brace and resist movements. Now, that's a little different than you initially think, at least it was for me. You see, when I was in grade school, I was told to do sit-ups and do crunches, which is a movement that deliberately flexes at the spine. Now those are great entry-level movements, but at some point, our spine's primarily responsibility is to make sure that we don't go into flexion if we don't want to. As well, we don't overextend our spine if that's not what we're looking for. Now those movements aren't dangerous, but if I can't control that, well, that's where you hear things like slipped discs or strained muscles in the lower back and things of that nature. So as far as movements go, we want to always prioritize what's happening through the core. We want great stability there. In addition to that though, we want great mobility or flexibility within our extremities. When we talk about our arms and our legs, we want those joints working together because that's how every movement outside of the gym operates. Very rarely am I doing something where just my wrist moves, but quite often it's the flexion of my wrist, my elbow, and my shoulder that work in coordination for most of the real life tasks that we participate in. So when we're talking movements, We want to make sure there's always a component of stability through the trunk, and then there's a component where I get to use my arms, my legs to their full advantage or the full range of motion. Now, there's different categories of movements. You can squat with your legs. That means your knees, ankles, and hips are all flexing and extending together. You can do what's called hinging at the hips. That means that your knees and your ankles primarily are static or not changing, but your hip is going to close and open. There's lots of movements in that category, things like a deadlift, things like a kettlebell swing. But here's the cool part. I just said a bunch of fancy words, but our body is already pre-wired to do that. We've just recently put language together with these positions that we've been able to do since we were born. So things like a deadlift, that's not really the point. But the point is that our body is designed to move in certain ways. So we have a squat, we have a hinge, we can push and pull with our extremities. And in addition to that, I mean, maybe we could carry some things. But the good news is when you're thinking about an exercise routine, there's a finite number of choices that you have in order to figure out how you might program or differentiate between the different ways that you could exercise. So there's that. Now here's my favorite part, and it's always been the fact that these movements can be progressed to be more difficult, or they can be regressed to be easier. Now why is that so cool? Well, because without that, it would be really impossible for two people to work out together unless they were identical twins. And even then, who knows if they could do it. But the fact that you can progress and regress every movement means that we can take you, if you were to train with this, and have you at a level that's challenging but not overwhelming. So I'll give you an example. We said squat at the beginning. And probably the entry-level position is just that you can hold yourself in a plank position and you can show that the muscles surrounding your spine can actually stabilize. From there, we may just squat with our own body weight down to an object and stand. From there, we remove the object, and then we slowly, over a long period of time, start to introduce a little extra resistance so you can work on incorporating a greater challenge of that deceleration. You take those basic levels and you can progress it all the way to things where there's a change of direction, where you're decelerating or producing speed, and that could take years. And the reason I mention that is because it makes exercise, when there's a progression, it makes it fun. It makes it where you're on this journey of development the same way that you would want to gain proficiency in any other type of skill that you would participate in. So up to this point, here's what we've tried to break down. Your body can exercise in different ways. Your body can move in different ways. We want to make sure that the ways with which we perform these movements are progressed in a way that's safe, in a way that's fun. And then from there, we come up with a simple structure, something weekly, where it's slightly more challenging than what you've done in the week past. It varies from the different ways that we can exercise and the different types of movements that we can perform. And we keep doing that as long as we can progress. Now, this is something that you could do in your own home. And there's great information out there. But one of the things that we find is the most helpful is to actually have somebody that knows what they're doing. Myself and the other coaches here at CFTC, we're not rocket scientists, but we have lots of experience with this stuff. And whether you're joining us or you're starting this out on your own, one of the best things you can do to start is to assess where you're at. It's really hard to know exactly what to do if you don't know where a good starting point is. So we have a saying around here, and it is that we assess, we don't guess. So if you were to join us, then what we would do is we would bring you in here. We'd take you through a series of tests that are probably 30 minutes or less. And by the end of that, we got some great dirt on you. We got some great information on how we might progress some of these movements and what the movements, more importantly, would be appropriate for you to participate in regardless of your goals. Now, when we attach that with your goals and what you're capable of doing, it's a pretty potent combination just to get you traction and progression towards what you want. So if that's something that you want, there's a link at the end of this video. We'd love to have just a free consultation to talk with you, explain this stuff a little bit more. If you're watching this video and you live in Alaska and that's not realistic, well then we'll see you on the next video where we break down some of the same similar components, but now we're talking about nutrition. See you on the next one.